It was 841 BC. Jerusalem. The figs in the courtyards were still green. The morning watch was changing, the way it changed every dawn. Sleepy soldiers walking back to their barracks, fresh ones taking their place at the gates. A water seller had already started his round, so as not to wake the children. It was an ordinary morning in the city of David. And then the screaming started. The soldiers in the royal hallways were not hunting enemies. They were hunting children. Their queen had given an order before the sun was up. Kill every grandson, kill every grandchild of the house of David. Leave no heir alive. The smell of cedar oil mixed with something darker now. But in a back room of the palace, a woman was running. A baby was crying in her arms. What few people know is that the entire Messianic promise, every prophecy about Christ, every word God had ever spoken about a coming king from David's line, was about to come down to this one woman, this one infant, this one hallway. And it is far more terrifying and far more beautiful than most Christians have ever been told. Two thrones stood in the land of God's people, one in Samaria, one in Jerusalem. The northern kingdom, the southern kingdom, two halves of what had once been one nation under David. And over both thrones hung a single promise. God had said it to David in 2 Samuel 7:13, "I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever." Forever. Not for a generation, not for a dynasty, forever. The promise had survived war, it had survived famine, it had survived the schism that broke the kingdom in two. But it had never been tested like this. The story begins with a marriage. King Jehoshaphat of Judah was a good king, a righteous king, but he made one decision that would nearly destroy everything God had built for 1,000 years. He married his son Jehoram to a princess of the northern kingdom. Her name was Athaliah. She was the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel. Stop and feel the weight of that name. Jezebel. The woman who had killed the prophets of God. The woman who painted her eyes and laughed as she fed worshippers of Baal at her own table. The woman whose name would become a synonym for evil for 3,000 years. Athaliah was her daughter, and she was about to walk through the gates of Jerusalem and sit beside the throne of David. Years passed. Jehoshaphat died. His son Jehoram took the throne. And the moment the crown touched his head, the killing started. Jehoram murdered every one of his brothers. He gathered them. He cut them down. He erased them from the line of David with his own hand. 2 Chronicles 21 records it without flinching. Then he led Judah into the worship of Baal. Then he died of a disease so painful, the chronicler wrote, "He departed with no one's regret." His son Ahaziah took the throne at 22. His mother Athaliah was his counselor in all his evil. He reigned for less than a year. Then he rode north to visit his uncle, the king of Israel, and he rode straight into the sword of Jehu. In a single afternoon, Jehu killed the king of Israel, the king of Judah, and 42 of Ahaziah's relatives. The blood ran in the dust of Jezreel, and a messenger rode hard for Jerusalem to tell the queen mother that her son was dead. This is where the story turns. Athaliah did not weep when she heard the news. She did not tear her robes. She did not call for the priests of Yahweh or the priests of Baal. She sat very still in her chamber, and the messenger watched her face. And the messenger would later say he had never seen a face go that empty, that fast. "If I cannot keep my family," she thought, "I will become the only one left." She rose. She gave the order. The Hebrew of 2 Kings 11:1 is brutal in its brevity. She arose and destroyed all the royal seed. 6 words, the end of a dynasty. The soldiers moved through the palace, room by room. The royal children were not in one place. They were scattered. Nurses' rooms, side chambers, the small apartments where royal sons were raised by attendants. The soldiers had a list. Athaliah killed all the royal children. Read that sentence again. In a palace that small, every nurse knew every child by name. Every mother heard the soldiers' sandals stop at her door before she heard them at the next one. The screams went on long enough that the people who survived had to count which voices had stopped before they could be sure who was still alive. Some of the children were old enough to understand. Some of them were small enough to be smothered without ever waking up. The grandmother, their grandmother, was killing them. In a hallway between two of those rooms, a woman stood pressed against the wall. Her name was Jehosheba. She was the daughter of King Jehoram by a different wife, not Athaliah's daughter. She was the half-sister of the murdered King Ahaziah. And she was the wife of Jehoiada, the high priest of Yahweh. A soldier passed her. His sandals left wet prints on the stone. He did not stop because she was a princess and not on the list. She closed her eyes. From the next room, she could hear a baby crying. Not screaming, crying, the way infants cry when they are hungry and the world is still safe. He did not know yet. He did not know that his brothers were already dead. He did not know that his father was dead. He did not know his name was on the list and the soldiers were 3 doors away. His name was Joash. He was the youngest son of Ahaziah. He was about 1 year old. He is the only one left, she thought. If I do not move now, the throne of David ends in this hallway. She moved. Jehosheba went into the nursery. The wet nurse was there, her face frozen, holding the baby against her chest. The wet nurse had her own child somewhere, a child of her own she had left behind to come to the palace and feed the prince. Whether that child was alive or dead this morning, the text never tells us. We will never know her name. She will not appear in any genealogy. But she carried Joash to her chest in that nursery, and she carried him for the next 6 years. And the line of David passed through her milk before it passed through anything else. Jehosheba did not explain. She did not have time. She lifted the baby. She took the wet nurse by the hand, and she ran. She ran past the rooms where she could still hear children crying. She ran past the rooms where the crying had already stopped. She did not look back. She could not look back. If she looked back, she would not be able to keep moving. She ran until she reached the temple. She did not hide the baby in the sanctuary. She hid him somewhere stranger. The Hebrew text says, Heder Hamitot, the chamber of beds. Not a royal bedroom, a storage closet, a small back room of the temple complex where spare mattresses and folded blankets were kept. The kind of room no one inspected. The kind of room a queen with no use for the temple of Yahweh would never enter. The future king of Judah was laid down among folded blankets, and the door was closed. Have you ever had to choose in a single moment what you could save when you could not save everything? Jehosheba carried out one baby. The screams of the others did not stop because she carried him. They stopped because the soldiers finished. She would carry that hallway with her for the rest of her life. But she also carried the line of David out of it. Year 1 of Athaliah. She walked into the throne room of Solomon and she sat down. The first woman in the history of Judah to wear that crown. The only queen regnant of David's throne. She built a temple to Baal in Jerusalem, not outside the city, inside it, across from the temple of Yahweh, so that anyone walking from one to the other could smell both, the clean smoke of grain offerings on one side of the street and the heavy, sweet iron smoke of Baal's fires on the other. She appointed a high priest of Baal, a man named Matan, to lead the worship of fire and fertility in the same city where Solomon had once dedicated a house to the living God. 2 Chronicles 24:7 Says her sons even broke into the house of God and carried away the holy vessels and used them in the worship of Baal. Sacred cups, sacred utensils, taken from the table of Yahweh and laid on the altar of a Canaanite idol. Year 2. Year 3. The smoke of Baal's fires rose over Jerusalem and mingled with the smoke of the temple sacrifices. Children of Judah grew up not knowing the difference. The priests of Yahweh continued their offerings, but in shadow. The priests of Baal walked openly. The queen ruled, and no one challenged her. Year 4. Jehosheba did not sleep for the first year. Every night she heard sandals in the hallway. Every night she sat up in bed and waited for the door of the chamber of beds to open. By the second year, she had learned to sleep again, but she still flinched at the sound of trumpets. Any trumpets, even festival trumpets, because the first thing she had imagined a soldier doing if they found him was sounding an alarm. In year 4, she sat across the room from her husband one evening. They did not speak about the boy. They never spoke about the boy. There was a third person in their marriage now, a person they could not name even to each other. But she said, quietly, in the voice she had learned to use,
"What if the 7th year never comes?"
Jehoiada did not answer her for a long time. Then he said, "Then we will keep him alive in the 8th. Year 5. But here is what no one in Jerusalem could see, and this is the part that is hardest to hold. Athaliah was not born evil. Pull back from the throne. Look at her life. She had been a girl in the court of Jezebel, raised by a mother who fed her power instead of love. She had been married off to seal a treaty. She had watched her father Ahab die from an arrow that found him through a gap in his armor. She had heard, just months before her purge, that Jehu had butchered everyone she came from in a single week. Her brother, her cousins, her mother thrown out of a window and eaten by dogs in the street. Her son Ahaziah cut down on a roadside. In a single year, she had lost every member of her family she had ever known. And then, she had killed every member of the family she had married into. She was not an inhuman monster. She was a woman who had been broken by violence and who had decided, the way broken people sometimes decide, that the only way to never be broken again was to become the breaker. This does not excuse her. Nothing excuses what she did to those children. But it means something terrible. It means that evil, when it is fed, grows from grief. It means that the woman on the throne of David was not simply a villain. She was a warning. And every reader who has ever responded to pain by becoming hard should feel the cold finger of recognition on the back of their neck. She did not know there was a child in a closet 30 feet from where she sometimes prayed. The child in the closet did not know there was a queen. Joash grew up in the temple. He was 2. He was 4. He was 6. He had never seen the city of Jerusalem outside the temple walls. He had never seen the throne his father had sat on. He had never heard the sound of trumpets at a coronation. He had never met another child his own age. His world was 3 rooms and a courtyard. Until he was 7 years old, he thought the world was 3 rooms. He thought the chant of Levites at dawn was the sound the sky made. A child who learned to before he learned to walk, whose first word was probably hushed by a hand, who did not know there was a sky beyond the cedar beams of the temple roof. He played with toys made of olive wood. He learned the alphabet from a Levite who taught him the law of God before he taught him the name of his own father. Sometimes God hides what he intends to reveal. Sometimes the most important thing in your whole life is the thing no one knows about yet. Year 6. The 7th year was coming. Yatan had served the queen for 7 years. He was a Karaite, a foreign mercenary, the kind of soldier kings hired when they did not trust their own people. He had stood outside Athaliah's bedroom door when she could not sleep. He had killed 2 men who had spoken against her in the marketplace. He had no opinion about Yahweh or Baal. He had an opinion about the silver she paid him, which was good, and about the pomegranates in the palace orchard, which were better. When the messenger came at dawn, telling him to report to the temple, not the palace, the temple, his hand went to his sword before his mind caught up. Karaites did not get summoned to the temple. The temple was the priest's business. He had not set foot inside its courtyards in 7 years. He went anyway. He went because the messenger was another captain of the Karaites, and the captain's face told him this was not a normal morning. Inside the temple, Jehoiada the priest was waiting. Yatan had seen him 100 times at festivals, bowing before the queen, blessing the bread, doing whatever it was priests did. He had never seen the man's face like this. Calm. Too calm. The kind of calm a man wears when he has waited 6 years to say a single sentence. There were other captains in the room, all of them Karaite, all of them confused. The priest spoke softly so the words would not carry past the doorway.
There is a king.
Yatan did not understand the sentence. There was a queen. He had served the queen for 7 years. There were no kings. There had been no kings since the queen's son had died on a road up north. The line had ended in a hallway 6 years ago. Everyone in Jerusalem knew that. The whole city had heard the screaming. The priest opened a door behind him, and in the doorway stood a boy, 7 years old, dark hair, serious eyes, standing very still the way children stand when they have been told to stand still and have never learned how not to obey. Yatan stared. He had served the queen for 7 years, and he had never once thought she might be wrong about something. He thought about the baby who had supposedly died. He thought about the hallway. He thought about the way the priest had bowed at festivals. Calm. Too calm. And he understood what that calm had been hiding. He dropped to one knee on the temple floor before he had decided to. The other captains went down with him. Then Jehoiada laid out the plan. He had thought about it for 6 years. He had thought about it on the days when Athaliah summoned him to bless her feasts. He had thought about it on the nights when his wife asked him, "What if the 7th year never comes?" The Sabbath shift change was the key. On the Sabbath, the temple guards rotated. The outgoing shift normally went home to rest. Jehoiada commanded that on this Sabbath, the outgoing shift would stay. That doubled his force without bringing any new troops into Jerusalem. Athaliah's spies would see nothing unusual. He divided the men into 3. Yatan was given the unit that would stand around the boy himself, spears ready. Strict orders. Anyone who broke the line and approached the king would die where they stood. Then Jehoiada opened a door at the back of the temple. Inside the room, dust hung in the lamplight. And against the wall, leaning where they had stood for almost a century, were the spears of King David, taken in his wars, dedicated to Yahweh after his victories, kept for the day they would be needed again. The priest pressed one of those spears into Yatan's hand. The shaft was dry cedar, almost weightless. The iron head was still sharp enough to cut. The weapon of the founder of the dynasty, in the hand of a foreign mercenary, about to defend the last living son of the line. And then they brought the boy out. Joash, 7 years old, walked into the temple courtyard for the first time he could remember. The light was different out here. The stone was warm under his feet. There were people, hundreds of people. Yatan had never seen the temple courtyard this full. A pillar rose beside the boy, one of the great bronze columns of Solomon's temple, where the kings of Judah had stood for ceremonies for 150 years. He stood by it because Jehoiada placed him there. The high priest set the crown on his head. He poured the oil of anointing, and then he placed something in the boy's hands. A scroll. The Hebrew word is edut, testimony, the same word used for the tablets of the Ten Commandments inside the Ark of the Covenant. The root means to bear witness. This was not a manual of kingship. This was the law of God, likely the book of Deuteronomy, handed to a 7-year-old child according to the command in Deuteronomy 17, that every king of Israel must have his own copy of the law and read it every day so he would learn to fear the Lord. Joash held it. The scroll is heavy, he thought, heavier than the crown. The trumpets sounded, the people clapped their hands, and a sound that had not been heard in Jerusalem for 6 years rolled through the temple courtyard and out across the city. "Long live the king!" Yatan stood with the spear of David in his hand and watched the boy hold the scroll. And he thought, for the first time in 7 years of taking silver from a queen, that he might be on the right side of something. In the palace, Athaliah heard it. She was in her chambers. There was wine on the table. The morning had been quiet, Sabbaths usually were, and then, faintly, from the direction of the temple, she heard trumpets. Then voices, hundreds of voices. A festival? She thought. No, not today. She rose. She walked through her own palace. The corridors were empty. The guards were gone. The doors were open. She walked past room after room, and there was no one. No servants, no advisors, no soldiers. The palace of the Queen of Judah was a hollow shell, and the Queen of Judah did not yet understand why. She walked out of her palace and toward the temple. The voices grew louder. The trumpets grew louder. And as she came up the temple steps, she saw it. The military ranks, perfectly formed. Her own Karaites, standing in a line that was not facing outward to protect her. They were facing inward, around something. The people of Jerusalem packed every space, weeping and shouting and clapping. The Levites were singing. And in the center of it all, by the bronze pillar where the kings of Judah always stood, was a boy, 7 years old, wearing a crown she recognized, holding a scroll, with Jehoiada the high priest standing beside him. She knew the face. She did not want to know the face, but she knew it. He had Ahaziah's eyes. He had her son's eyes. There are promises in your life that you thought were dead. They were only hidden. She tore her royal robes. The cloth ripped through the trumpets for 1 second.
Treason! Treason!
No one moved. Jehoiada did not raise his voice. He spoke to the captains the way a surgeon speaks to a nurse during an operation.
Bring her out between the ranks. Whoever follows her, kill with the sword.
But do not put her to death in the house of the Lord.
The temple was the dwelling place of God's name. The blood of an idolater would defile its courts. So they would not kill her here. They would kill her where she had ruled. Yatin stepped forward with another captain. They took Athaliah by the arms, this woman whose silver he had carried home for 7 years, this woman whose door he had stood outside in the dark, this woman who had built temples to Baal in the holy city. And they pulled her down the steps of the temple. The crowd parted. No one tried to follow her. No one tried to save her. They moved her through the foundation gate. They turned east, down the slope of the Ophel, where the archaeologist Eilat Mazar excavated in our own time and found the gatehouse foundations of Solomonic Jerusalem, massive ashlar stones from this exact century. They took her down toward the royal stables, the horse gate, the place where her own chariots were kept, the place where her own cavalry had ridden out under her command. The smell of horses was thick in the morning air, hooves striking stone, dust rising in the light. She had ridden through this gate in royal robes 100 times. She passed through it now in torn cloth, between 2 foreign mercenaries who had once been her bodyguards. At the threshold of her own military power, beside the animals that had pulled her chariots, the queen who had killed the children of Judah died. The text does not describe the blow. It does not need to. The chronicler simply writes that they killed her there. When it was finished, Yatin walked back up the slope toward the temple alone. He passed the foundation gate. He passed the courts where the people were still rejoicing. He climbed the steps and sat down, still holding the spear of David, at the side of the temple where the morning light came in. He did not know exactly why he was sitting. He did not know what to do with his hands. A few feet away, on the same step, an old man was sitting, the high priest, Jehoiada. He had crowned a king and ordered an execution and brought down a dynasty before the third hour of the day. And now he was sitting with his hands on his knees, and his eyes were full. Yatin was not sure who the priest was weeping for. He was not sure the priest was sure either. Maybe for the boy. Maybe for the 6 years. Maybe for the woman they had just dragged through the horse gate, who had once been a girl in Jezreel before any of this had broken her. The two men sat there for a long time and did not speak. The people of Jerusalem went straight from the horse gate to the temple of Baal. 6 years of forced silence broke at once. They tore the walls down with their hands. They smashed the altars. They broke the images into pieces small enough to carry away and bury. And in front of his own altars, in front of the gods who had failed to protect him, they killed Matan, the high priest of Baal. Jehoiada gathered the king and the people in the temple courtyard. He brokered a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people that they would be the Lord's people again. The Levites took up their old positions. The courses of the priests were restored. The morning sacrifices began again. The songs of David returned to the courts of David's house. And a 7-year-old boy sat on the throne of his great-great-grandfather. But here is what this story is really about. The promise of God to David, that his throne would last forever, that from his line would come a king whose kingdom would have no end. That promise had been reduced in 841 BC to a single child sleeping in a storage closet, fed on the milk of a woman whose name we will never know, hidden by an ant who flinched at trumpets for the rest of her life. Every prophecy about the Messiah, every word about a coming Redeemer, every line of every psalm that pointed forward to Christ, all of it hung on the breath of one infant whose grandmother was hunting him. The line that produced Hezekiah passed through that closet. The line that produced Josiah passed through that closet. The line that produced the genealogy in Matthew 1, the one that ends with, "And Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom Jesus was born, who is called Christ." That line passed through that closet. 1,000 years of redemptive history were carried in the arms of Jehosheba down a hallway. God's promises do not die. They go underground. They get hidden in storage rooms. They are kept alive by people whose names will never be on any list. Wet nurses, half-sisters, foreign mercenaries who change sides in a single morning, old priests who weep on temple steps for reasons no sermon can fully explain. The waiting is not the end of the story. The waiting is the chamber of beds. The trumpets are still coming. Maybe there is something in your life right now that feels dead. Maybe a promise. Maybe a calling. Maybe a hope you stopped saying out loud because saying it out loud started to hurt. The God who hid Joash for 6 years is not finished with what he has hidden in you. Tell me in the comments, what is the promise in your life that feels hidden right now? Long live the King, the one who sat by the pillar at 7, and the one whose line was kept alive to bring.